In the run-up to the release of Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker on December the 20th this year, I thought now would be as good a time as any to go through all the Disney released Star Wars films, and this sort of unscripted ramble, but I do have a point to make. So the first one that Disney released was Star Wars The Force Awakens on December the 18th, 2015, directed by J.J. Abrams and written by Lawrence Kasdan and J.J. Abrams and Michael Arndt, who famously pulled out of the project around 2013 by my reckoning, as I can remember it at least. And he did write the screenplay, or helped to write. He wasn't obviously the only writer, but he was one of the screenwriters on Toy Story 3. And I remember hearing that and thought, oh, that's an interesting decision by Lucasfilm to get him on board. And he pulled out. So how much involvement he had in the final film, who knows? But The Force Awakens is an interesting film because it's, as has been discussed near to death by now, it is basically a complete rehash of the original Star Wars film, A New Hope. Well, it wasn't called A New Hope until 1981, but you know what I mean. The original Star Wars movie from 1977. And I don't get too fussed about it. It sort of makes sense to gently reintroduce people to that Star Wars universe, but I think possibly Disney were a little bit misguided, and I have heard reports and varying accounts. I haven't got any insider information, but I have heard, sources of various news articles, whether they're true or not, who knows, that they basically were going to make a properly quote-unquote original Star Wars script for this episode 7, but then Bob Iger of Disney said, there's not enough time, just do A New Hope. And they were originally, Force Awakens was genuinely going to be released initially in the spring of 2015, but they postponed it to December, presumably so it didn't clash with Avengers Age of Ultron, which is obviously technically another Disney thing. So with that, and also it would have been a complete mess if both films, it would have been pretty interesting from a numbers perspective, but it wouldn't have been very good for Disney to have Marvel and Star Wars basically competing alongside each other. And you'll actually be hard-pressed generally to find two massive films up against each other. So that's why, by my guess at work at least, that Force Awakens was postponed to the December. And that's also why the only Star Wars film to have been released in the spring under the Disney era, Solo, bombed. So, because Marvel had come in while Star Wars had been away and taken that coveted spring, early summer slot, which Star Wars can no longer get back. So The Force Awakens is an interesting film. I think it's good, but that's just it. It's good, quite derivative, and a tad forgettable. Then we get to Star Wars... Well, not The Last Jedi, actually. As it turns out, the next one that was released was Rogue One: A Star Wars Story, which I remember that film coming out, and I remember there was this really positive reaction on the internet. Really like, oh my word, it's the best Star Wars movie since Empire kind of thing. And I thought, really? Is it the best one since Empire? It's not that good, and the only thing for me that stands out in that movie is basically the Darth Vader hallway scene, which is about a minute long out of, a 2-hour movie. It's not really a huge selling point when the best thing in a movie lasts no more than a minute. So, it's a good movie, it's nice that it explores a different angle of the Star Wars universe, but I just found it entertaining and all that stuff. But now it's been nearly 3 years since the film came out, I can conclude that it was a little bit pointless, and it was basically a cynical money-making scheme on the part of Disney to capitalise off this Star Wars hype. There wasn't any Star Wars fatigue at this point, so it was a good opportunity to sort of, make a Star Wars movie from a different angle, and I think it wasn't misguided by Disney to do this, a Star Wars story, these sort of spin-offs. And I think Rogue One is a pretty good film, but that's just it. It's a pretty good film, and that's it. I don't wake up in the middle of the night thinking, oh wow, Rogue One's so good, I'm going to watch it tomorrow night, or I'm going to watch it at the nearest opportunity. I have no real desire to return to that movie. It's fine. It's not really, really bad, but it's not really, really good. It's just kind of alright. So it's not really a glossing review, is it? And then, of course, a year later was the much discussed movie Star Wars: The Last Jedi, which is probably the most split down the middle, divisive Star Wars movie ever made. You could argue this is sort of exaggerated in this internet age, but I do think some of the criticisms of The Last Jedi are legitimate and genuine criticisms. At the time, when I saw the movie, I thought it was really good, and I thought all the people who were saying it was the worst one ever were idiots. But I don't personally think it's the worst Star Wars movie. I think it's pretty good. It's pretty good. There's a theme developing. It's a pretty good movie. It's got more good than bad, but it's definitely, a very muddled movie that almost feels like it was written in the first draft. It's too long. There's whole scenes and segments that don't need to be in the film at all, or could be much shorter. So there's a lot that could have been done better, but I don't think it's a train wreck. And I'm slightly baffled that people call it not just one of the worst Star Wars movies, but one of the worst movies of all time. I mean, that really does baffle me, because it's just not. I mean, I do understand, and I think The Last Jedi is interesting because it was written and directed by just Rian Johnson, whilst The Force Awakens is a very committee-made film. It's very safe, it's very controlled, whilst it's like Kathleen Kennedy was like, Kathleen Kennedy was like, yeah, Rian Johnson, just make a movie. Just make a Star Wars movie about whatever the hell you want, and we'll figure out later. And I think some of the things I like and some of the things I don't like, and it's a very... I have mixed views on the movie, but at the moment, at time of recording, I can say I like it more than I hate it, which is hardly, what the people who made the movie want to hear. What did you think of The Last Jedi? Well, I liked it more than I hated it. I mean, it's hardly the most, it's hardly the biggest praise to lavish upon a movie, is it? And then we get to Solo, a Star Wars story, which nobody saw because it was marketed horrifically. The first trailer didn't come out until the February of 2018, by which stage, any film coming around about that time had already had probably 2 trailers, like Deadpool 2. Infinity War came out a few weeks before Solo. It came out in April, but it was still a big deal by the time Solo came out. And I saw Solo, and I expected a complete car crash of a movie, and it was alright. It was pretty good. Again, it was alright. But I've made a review. My very first video on this channel, in fact, was a review of Solo, and I kind of still like Solo, but I have had no desire to go back and rewatch it. And it's fine. It hasn't added much to the universe or my perspective of Star Wars. It isn't obnoxiously bad. It's fine. But I did expect a train wreck given the production problems the film experienced. So that's kind of it, really. Those are my views on the Disney Star Wars movies, and it's not exactly glowing. I have a slightly mixed perspective because I could really talk about the characterization of the likes of Rey and Finn and Poe and Kylo Ren, and I also, there's and the nostalgia and the fan service element of these movies as well, because not one of these movies that Disney has released feels like a proper bold new direction for the franchise. They all feel kind of derivative of the original trilogy entries. So I think maybe Disney have slightly misinterpreted how to handle Star Wars. And again, I'm not shitting on the franchise. And I'm not saying, Kathleen Kennedy and Disney have ruined my childhood and they've ruined Star Wars, because they haven't. And I like these movies, but there's a lack of a connection on an emotional level. And I want to sound like a film school nerd. I haven't got an emotional connection with these movies, especially. I haven't really connected with really any of the new characters except maybe Kylo Ren, who's obviously the villain of the piece. But, and I thought the anthology movies were pretty good, but I haven't really made much of an effort to rewatch either of those movies, which suggests to me that they're not that good. If they were truly amazing, I would have watched them at least once more. I think the issue for Star Wars is to try and get people like me interested in their post Episode 9 stuff, because if they can't, then they're kind of ruined as a franchise, aren't they? And I think a fatigue has definitely set in. Had Solo been scrapped or not released at all, maybe more people would be interested in Episode 9, but at the moment there appears to be a sleepiness to the franchise, and just I'll watch the film, but we'll see how it goes, sort of thing. There's a lack of, a few years ago, 4 years ago, it was like, yes, Force Awakens is coming out, I can't wait, it's going to be the best thing ever. And now it's like, yeah, the Rise of Skywalker is coming out, and I'm sure it'll be good, and and then I'll go home and have a pasty. It's not the most enthusiastic response to a promotional campaign for a movie I've ever seen. Particularly, Star Wars is huge, and this is kind of a sleepy response. Star Wars fatigue is definitely, maybe it was a theory a year or two ago, but now it's a real thing. That, it'll be interesting to see how Star Wars deal with their new films from 2022 onwards. I think that's when the first of the new era, if you will, come out. So they're taking a break. I haven't got the dates in front of me. That's when I think they're coming out. They're taking a break, and they're doing something with Kevin Feige as well. I hope there isn't. I hope they don't take a break and then they just go back to going nuts and they fatigue sets in all over again. I do think there needs to be a real realignment, a real refocusing of efforts because I think some people are like, well, Star Wars. People either say Star Wars ended with Revenge of the Sith, like it's a 6-film saga, or there are people saying it will end with the Rise of Skywalker. It'll be a 9-act saga, and then I won't bother with the franchise ever again. I have mixed views on it. I'm slightly neutral on this new Rise of Skywalker movie. On one hand, I'm really looking forward to Palpatine coming back, irrespective of how it relates to his supposed death in Return of the Jedi. I just want to see Ian McDiarmid because he's just perfect in the role. He's just so, so good. But on the other hand, I'm just like, yeah, I'll see it, and then I will go home, which is hardly the most enthusiastic response in the world. So, and I don't need the post-Episode 9 movies to be successful. I don't even need Episode 9 to be successful. Because the original trilogy they are my Star Wars movies, and they're not going away. They're amazing, and that's that. So, what do you think of the Disney era of Star Wars movies? Do you love them? Do you hate them? Are you kind of in the middle, like me? Or, some magical other opinion? Let me know in the box downstairs, otherwise known as the comments section. Goodbye.